thank you again for everybody for showing up. Good to see a pretty good crowd here. And I'm going to kick off by introducing our panel members. Directly next to me is Tara Christie, who I've known for a number of years, President and CEO of Banyan Gold. Next to her is Ian Gibbs, newly minted CEO of Fireweed Metals. And on the end there, we have Rory Quinn, who is the CEO of Yukon Metals. So to kick things off, I'm going to have each of the members give a quick 30 seconds, and we promise to hold them to that and time them, but I'm not going to try to mess around with my watch, so it's the honor system to keep it to about 30 seconds. Quick overview of your project and the plans for 2025. And I'll just start with Tara, since you're right next to me. That works, and you've got the mic.
Great. Thanks, Paul. And, as Liz said, we've got 7 million ounces right near Mayo in the Yukon with existing roads and power on the property. Our catalyst this year, we just put out some more of our drill results this morning, including 16 meters of 9 grams, which is definitely changing the profile of the Ormac deposit from the 0.6 average grade. So lots to come with our resource update here in Q2. We are planning our drill program over the next couple of days with, too many targets. What a problem to have. So look for that announcement as we get closer to that. And then we'll end the year with not only more drill results into 2026, but also our PEA, our maiden PEA. So should be a great year for us.
No, excellent. It's it's been fun seeing all the results coming out this year. Moving on to you, Ian.
Yeah, so Fireweed, I think the goal for 2025 is just continue with the momentum we generated in 2024. We saw a resource come out doubling the size of the previous resource. We're up to combining indicated and inferred over 100 million tons at over 7% zinc equivalent. I think the end of the year really set the stage for what's to come this year with both US DPA funding and Canadian CMIF funding. So clearly, the governments are getting behind the critical minerals district that we have that has both the largest, highest grade undeveloped tungsten deposit, as well as the MacPass zinc, lead, silver deposit, which ranks right up there. So 2025, we're going to be spending government money and taking these projects forward, advancing them. Our lifeline is the North Canal Road. CMIF funding is going to help us get started on improving that. And the DPA funding is going to be targeted at the tungsten deposit, which is best in class, and that's being acknowledged by the U.S. government. So I think it's going to be an incredible year.
Great, thanks, Ian. Roy?
Well, Yukon Metals is a new company. It's the product of 30 years of prospecting by the Birdall family. That's the family behind Snowline Gold's suite of gold primary assets. Yukon Metals provides exposure to gold and silver and also copper and a suite of critical metals. We have 3 assets that we're advancing to drilling this season here. One is Star River. Star River has delivered bonanza grade gold and silver samples, sits on an all-weather access road, and really we have a bullseye target there lined up for this season. At Birch, we believe we have an intact copper porphyry. We'll be advancing drilling on that. And an AZ, which I put out news release on this morning, we have 3.5% copper outcropping 6 kilometers away from the Alaska Highway, part of a 5-kilometer long trend. Very excited about the upcoming season. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I'm going to start here pretty broadly, and we're going to start with sort of the geopolitics that we're seeing right now. Obviously, Canada is blessed with a number of critical minerals: copper, molybdenum, lithium, and we've seen globally the gold price go up significantly. I was hoping it was going to top over 3,000 this morning, but not quite. I hate to dive in and talk about Trump, but obviously he's sort of dominating what's happening geopolitically and globally, and he's talked about Canada and access to critical minerals. He's talked about Ukraine and access to critical minerals. He's talked about Russia and access to critical minerals. And also the importance of gold. I heard that J.D. Vance is going to go into Fort Knox and actually count the gold bars, so just to make sure it's there. But with all of this geopolitics, and of course we'll be most very interested, Ian, to hear what you say. But I'm going to start with Rory on how that's impacted, how you think how that's impacted things so far with your company and your project, and how you think it's going to impact moving forward.
Well, we're quite early stage, pre-drilling, and I'm sure Ian and Tamara will have more to say on this, but I think key is obviously providing and gaining access to markets, right, and reducing bottlenecks.
Have you seen, I mean, before I let you off the hook here, I mean, you guys are a new company, but I mean, have you seen, I mean, and you have a large number of targets. Some of them are gold, some of them are copper, some of them are other. I mean, have you sort of shifted your focus towards more of a critical minerals to gold, or how is that weighed in at all, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've let the results kind of speak for themselves. So we started off with Star River and thinking that was a silver, lead, zinc opportunity, and it quickly became a precious metals opportunity. We were blessed with 17 assets. So for us, it was key to focus immediately and prioritize. So we've tended to prioritize on assets that are copper, gold, and silver, lead, zinc focused, but we have 4 tungsten assets too, and so we've been doing some desk work, Helena and her team, and I think we'll be parallel to all the exploration work we're doing. We'll be looking at ways that we can create value and do some portfolio optimization on the balance of the portfolio. So whether it's us using our treasury to advance some of these assets, or it's bringing on a partner that might want to help and use their treasury to earn in some of the high quality assets we have, then we'll look at that.
Excellent. Maybe pass down the line. Ian.
Yeah, I think geopolitics probably is most relevant to fireweed. There's no doubt we're seeing noise south of the border, and we're seeing our elected officials go back and forth with American officials. But I think when it comes to tungsten, it's North America. We, Canada, the United States, needs to look at the supply chain and really ask ourselves, how are we going to deal with this? Over 80% of primary tungsten production comes from China. The other major producers include Russia. We haven't had tungsten production in North America since 2015. I've never been involved in something where it is so obvious that something needs to be solved. And so in our discussions with the Yukon government, Northwest Territories, and others, we're obviously having discussions on both sides of the border. We're seeing great alignment. It needs to be developed. And what happens with the Mactung district is this deposit is a complete outlier. It's massive. It's high grade. It's a super large deposit. It's well known. It has an existing feasibility study from the previous owner. It had a 2014 decision document from both the Yukon and the federal government at the end of an environmental assessment process. We've continued to keep up our environmental work. We've stayed relevant in the local Indigenous communities. So it's something I think the governments on both sides of the border are acknowledging, the DPA funding directly from Department of Defense, and then to see the Canadian government get on board with it as well, to give us $12.9 million Canadian of CMIF funding. And that's really to get started on upgrading the critical infrastructure, which is the North Canal Road, which is the lifeline for us. And I think we're able to put the schedules side by side and see how, if we have these parties all behind us, if the work that we're doing, this year we'll be spending time working on the GeoMet, we'll be doing a lot of geotech. We want to refine the flow sheet a bit. But if everyone comes together and aligns around this, I think this is a super critical piece of critical minerals that could be solved here in Canada, in the Yukon. And I think it would have a very considerable effect. We have other, particularly gold assets held by other companies in the district, and I don't think it's lost on the Yukon government that getting behind our critical minerals project, aligning with the United States, provides an opportunity to get this thing started and to then potentially layer on financing and funding for the infrastructure. So I feel it's a bit of a gift horse. I've stepped into this role right as they were getting this funding, and so it's a super exciting time for the company.
Thanks. Tara?
Well, while we may not quite have as much Trump impact, certainly the price of gold, we're starting to see some life, and you can see it in our share price. We're already getting particularly timed with the results that we've been putting out, which I think have been changing perceptions about Banyan. In times of political and geopolitical uncertainty, people go to gold, particularly, there's so much hype about the various coins and bitcoins. The contrarians are going, maybe we should be looking at something. This is a great gold price. We saw $4,100 Canadian. The majors are cash flowing very significantly, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer in the cycle for that cash to come. And which projects are going to get purchased first? Well, the ones that are actually significant, the ones that have a resource that's large enough to be a significant producer. And maybe that's not a 200,000 ounce producer. Banyan likely more like a 300,000 ounce producer. And with other projects in the district, somebody could be a 500,000 or 600,000 producer right around us. That is significant, and I think that is what companies are looking for, particularly with roads and power. So I've had more generalist investors that have never invested in the sector walk in the door, actually, of my office and want to actually talk to me about it. They've never made a mining investment, but they got a lot of money, and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. I haven't had that in a really long time. So, maybe not here, but certainly I know we have a lot more inbound interest because people are starting to notice the price of gold.
Yeah, no, it was interesting last year. Everyone was waiting in the junior mining space for share prices to move when we saw gold go up and copper go up, and it didn't happen. And we waited, but beginning of this year, here we finally see it, which is very, very good. Okay, well, shifting a little more locally here, and we'll talk a little bit about infrastructure. And having been the CEO of Western, and I cannot tell you, and I'm sure Tara, who's a longer-term CEO than the other two here, how many times you walk in and people go, oh, I love the Yukon, but the infrastructure, and I want to pull my hair out. But that's happening naturally, so that's okay. But because there is very good infrastructure in the Yukon, but more importantly than that, where there are some shortcomings, there's been a lot of announcements over the past couple of years, and starting. Going back a few years with the Yukon Resource Gateway project, which was a number of roads initiatives. There's an initiative underway right now for broadband expansion to bring faster internet up there, renewable energy projects, and then a couple big ones that happened over the past 2 years, starting with commitment to the Port of Skagway in terms of ensuring that remains Yukon's deepwater port. And then lastly, actually, as part of the same funding that Fireweed Metals got, the CMIF funding, to look at a grid intertie with British Columbia. With that sort of backdrop, as I said, at least from my experience, investors are always interested in the infrastructure in the Yukon. And I'll start with you, Tara, since you have the mic. Talk a bit about the infrastructure and of your project and any challenges and any advantages that you see from some of these initiatives that have been announced over the past couple of years.
Well, first is, of course, power, which is for every project from Western to Fireweed to mine. Getting more power in the grid is something the Yukon needs just for their community. So for them to have a partnership and to have some projects come along with the government funding, is going to be very advantageous to get more power in the grid. For us, we've already got power lines across the property. We look at them from our camp, and we've already had conversations about getting connected. We know exactly how much it costs for us to get connected, which hopefully in the next couple of years we can make that happen. We already own the power poles because we bought them when they put the new line across our property in 2021, a brand new line, 138 kilovolts, only energized to 69, so it has capacity built in the line. We just need to get the extra power in the grid. Our property has cell phone service. We have fiber optic cable out the McQuestion, and that fiber optic cable that's going to go up to Keno, it's going to go right across our property. So, that's a huge benefit to us. We've already got roads, and I think that is something we as Yukoners and as projects need to do is communicate. We've already got fabulous infrastructure, road accessible projects with significant resources to really debunk that myth that the North is lacking infrastructure, because we have infrastructure in spades. And I have to say that over and over again. I even have 4 bars on my cell phone when I'm there, which is actually bad for your drillers because they get distracted with social media. So you have to make sure they're very incentivized to actually stay drilling. But, that's pretty fabulous infrastructure.
Yeah, excellent. Ian? Oh, you're going to...
Okay, I think I touched on a bit of this when I spoke earlier, but reiterating what you said, having the CMIF funding for the government to take a look at bringing power in across boundary. I don't think anyone is ever going to complain about a good, sustainable, clean source of energy coming into a grid. I think we have to recognize that those are complicated projects that take a fair bit of time. But what we're seeing is the indication from the governments that they're working on this. I mean, I think I've worked internationally most of my career, and there are many times you have fabulous districts that the government just isn't aware of, doesn't care about. And I think that's what kind of sets the Yukon apart, and particularly fireweed apart, because with our critical minerals element, the tungsten obviously is a no-brainer as a critical element. The germanium and gallium that we included in our resource results, we didn't put a value on it, but we actually included values, and we've got a significant deposit. And so I think that just highlights the strategic nature of the Yukon, of our assets, and that will draw the infrastructure. So the North Canal Road that I mentioned, that is, it's over a 200-kilometer road. It's been around since the 40s or 50s, but it's in disrepair. You can pass it, but you wouldn't want to have a concentrate truck running up and down it, or having heavy equipment come build a mine. But that is clearly seen by the government as an enabling infrastructure for the district. So again, what we hope to see is that this is just the start of a funding process. We're glad that our critical position in the Yukon is able to keep the governments focused, and we will work with our industry partners to make sure that at the right time we're putting together socioeconomic analysis to show that the return on these investments is just not one project. It's going to unlock districts that some, if not all of us, will be benefiting from. So it resonates well with the Indigenous communities as well. We want to deliver economic and social benefits there. These mines need to be unlocked. We will need to address some issues associated with that, obviously, where you have roads, you have increased hunting pressure. So we're leaning on the Yukon government to make sure they address those issues. But overall, from an infrastructure perspective, to have governments on both sides of the border focused on it and putting money to it, I think it bodes well for us and the Yukon.
Great. Rory?
Yeah, Yukon Metals, we're quite fortunate to have outstanding access, actually. So it's quite unique in the Yukon to have Star River is a 5-hour drive from Whitehorse. I can get to site right from the airport. And it's an all-weather road that's plowed year-round. I visited the site there at Star River in September and stayed in a really comfortable cabin about an hour away, was able to get in the morning and back in the afternoon. So outstanding access there. I think that's really going to help us from a drill cost perspective. The fact that we'll be able to bring in Timmins type rigs there, on skids, with a shed on top. Really transitioning away from purely helicopter supported projects. Also at AZ, in a relatively underexplored area of the territory, we're talking about a 5-kilometer trend, as mentioned, 3.5% copper, historical trenching, delivering 10.3% copper. The RON was advancing, and so demonstrating potential for scale, grade, and then critically this accessibility, which for us really helped frame the assets and the effort and the dollars that we put in to this last season, is accessibility infrastructure being such a big part of it. You're going to hear from us about our tungsten assets this season, principally RISB, which is very interesting from a tungsten perspective. We'll want to advance a 43-101 on that. It's also gold intrusion related there. And so this, from a point of view of accessibility, 30 kilometers away from power, 30 kilometers away from the road, near our Star River project. So that's from a Yukon Metals perspective. I'm relatively new to the Yukon compared to other folks, but certainly it seems intuitive to me that a deep water port would be critical to getting certainly base metals, critical metals to markets around the world.
Great. Okay, thank you. So shifting here a bit, talking maybe a little bit about the elephant in the room. Mining in the Yukon had a setback last year with Victoria Gold's heap leach incident. Since that time, though, there's been actually a number of positive developments, with a number of First Nations coming out pretty strongly in support of mining. We've had the government come out in support of mining, and so. And I'll just because you've got the mic, I'll start with you, Rory. As you said, fairly freshly minted, but how have you found the atmosphere, the relationship with your First Nations, and the overall sort of maybe permitting and regulatory environment in the Yukon so far?
Yeah, well, the event obviously at Victoria Gold was unfortunate and did provide some headwinds there for a little while for companies. And I think we had one of our 17 assets were within the same territory, an NND territory, and they requested, I think, quite reasonably, that we hold off on our permitting efforts in that area while they're dealing with a difficult situation. They, since in November, invited us to join them in the permitting process and to start consulting with them. So I think that was a pretty quick turnaround. I think just from a market standpoint, I think certainly in July, August, it was difficult. I think there was not that much understanding of the various communities and various regions in the Yukon. And I think you had a lot of skittishness on various sales desks and about the Yukon and the potential for investment there ongoing and raising capital. But I would say by September, when we were in Beaver Creek, that had turned around substantially, right? I had 40 meetings there, perhaps a third of which were corp dev looking for exposure to the Yukon. Right, looking to whether it's single asset companies looking to add some diversity, add a second asset, or other companies that perhaps in more tricky jurisdictions looking to diversify their political risk somewhat and better it. So look. Prices might have had something to do with that, where folks thought that they might that it might have been an opportune time to gain access to the Yukon. But I started to see it really turning around then, and moving forward. I mean, look, we're talking about Fireweed Metals here, with the Lundin family backing them. From my understanding, the Lundin family are as or more bullish on the Yukon as anywhere else on Earth. Right, and you've got big companies like B2 Gold, and the aforementioned. I think some of the names you mentioned earlier, Mitsubishi. So you've got big names, and an asset like the Valley project. that really, I mean, the word world class gets thrown around a little bit too much in the markets, but I think if we don't call the Valley project world class, then it really doesn't have any meaning, right? If you look at that kind of continuity, that kind of grade, right, the kind of consistency that they're seeing, and that's going to get the attention of a mid-tier or major, that where the quality of those ounces relative to a quality jurisdiction like the Yukon, the grade and continuity of those ounces are going to be accretive to mid-tier or major, and that's going to help really, I think, highlight the potential of the Yukon.
Great. Ian?
Yeah, I would echo several of those thoughts. Obviously, for our industry, we have to do everything in our power to not allow those things to happen. And we can't just sort of sweep them into the dustbin. We have to learn from them and make sure that we do things properly and that we're able to demonstrate to our rights holders and stakeholders that those items have been addressed when we engineer and operate a project. As for sort of the lasting impacts of it, being new in the last few weeks, I don't see a lot of sort of investor focus on it. And in my limited interaction with the Indigenous communities that I've had interaction with, it's not something that is just coming up time after time. I think it just goes without saying that for the rights holders, the environment matters, and nothing changed. It just was highlighted once again that you have to do things properly. And, you know, as you were saying, the Lundins are very bullish on the Yukon. I've spent 20 years working for the Lundins all over the world, everywhere but Canada, and I'm now in the Yukon. And so I think that says everything. I've just come off the Filo project, and prior to that, the Jose Maria project in Argentina, where we've successfully created a district, and we see that opportunity here. And when it comes to permitting, I think the best thing we're able to point to is what we've done at Lundin Gold in Ecuador, where we were able to go into a fairly anti-mining jurisdiction that others had trouble operating in. We were able to explain to the local stakeholders and right holders what sort of social benefit and economic benefit there would be. And here we are, 500,000 ounce a year producer. I think the local Indigenous community that is anti-mining would be one of our biggest proponents. I would love to take them up to the Yukon to have them tell their story. We've got endless stories of social and economic benefit. The Lundin Foundation is winning UN Global Compact Awards for the sustainability work they're doing. And the Lundins are multi-generational. I'm now on my third generation of Lundin bosses. They're here for the long term. They're not looking to do it quickly, and I'll probably be working for the next generation of Lundins at some point. They want to build things that hold up, that are legacy projects. So I think we're well aligned, and I think the industry should be able to overcome what has happened and learn from it and be better in the future, and we owe that to the stakeholders.
Great. Tara?
Yeah, along that same line, after last summer, we really focused on making sure we were doing everything right. We expanded our baseline environmental. We're a pretty big employer in the Mayo area. 30% of our employees come from the Mayo community, 25% First Nation, 52% Yukoners. So I think we're probably one of the exploration companies that has the highest percentage of actual Yukoners of our workforce. And so, that gives us really strong connections into the community. Of course, I've been working in the Yukon since I was 8, so I've got very long, my father, placer mining, I've spent a long time in the Yukon, and we've working with the First Nations communities is very important. We've re-engaged with Nachonaik done, had some conversations, and certainly there were key issues which they wanted to talk about before this last year. And we've made sure we're ready for engaging on those conversations by getting the data and the information to really help to answer some of the questions, and of course doing things right. Again, we've made sure that we've redoubled our efforts on our progressive reclamation, and really those connections with the community. Of course, the charity that we've run. Again, after what happened, we were worried that whether it would be sustainable. We've given out over $2.6 million focused on working with youth, First Nations, schools, community groups. And again, we have money to deploy this year because we've worked really hard to make sure that we can continue those efforts, because it's finally starting to work. We've had 13 years of R&D, and we know what works, and we've got communities and First Nations and schools behind us. And so, it's that impact into the communities and on the economy of the Yukon, which the mining industry can win over hearts and souls, because particularly when there's pretty significant deficits in the Yukon economy with the lack of another operating mine. We still have Hecla there, but that is really where we're seen as being really important for the economy and the community. And you can't underestimate how important it is for people to belong and to have a meaningful job in their own community. And that's something that our industry does provide and that Banyan provides.
Yeah. No, I mean, your charity, Every Student Every Day, has been a real success story and a real important part of the Yukon. So I'm getting waved from the back there. How much time do I have, Nicole? Just negative a couple of minutes. Is that what you're suggesting? Okay. Well, I'm going to actually I'm going to have you pass real quickly. With our two minted CEOs, I'm going to start over there. You can pass it down to Rory. You got 30 seconds. Tell me one thing that has, as a new member of the Yukon mining community, one thing that surprised you about the Yukon so far.
Well, I might take over 30 seconds, but yeah, really, it is just the shock at just the prospectivity, the level of prospectivity, the mineral endowment in the Yukon. I've worked in the space for 20 years, done site visits certainly all over the Americas, and been involved in mining projects around the world, and I've never seen the level of prospectivity I've seen in the Yukon. At site at Star River, we can walk you up from the road, the access road, and you can take a pickaxe and hack metal out of the ground, and I've never experienced that before. And we've just opened a new office here in town, and we're kind of showing our wares and the various rock samples we have, and it's just to see the amount of high grade outcropping relatively close to infrastructure and roads, like we've all talked about, is incredible.
Great. Ian?
Yeah, I would just say that as well, the prospectivity, but even on top of that is the level of engagement. Like I said, I've worked all over the world, and I've never walked into a job where I'm pretty sure I could go to the Yukon or to the Northwest Territories and have an audience with the Premier, the Minister of this, Minister of that, go over to the local right holder communities and have an audience. And so we need to figure out ways to do it. We need to figure out ways to fund it. But I think the intent is there, and everyone realizes that the way to develop and have prosperity and social benefits is through mining in these jurisdictions. So it's just about figuring out how to do it right, and that's very exciting, because I'm confident that we know how to do it right.
Great. And Tara, I'll give you the last word as a long time born and raised. What do you think about their comments? Yeah.
Oh, I think the geological prospectivity is something we're only just discovering. Look, we made our discovery in 2019 under a power line beside a road, a highway, and it wasn't found. So what is out there further? And Snowline made their discovery in 2021, and look where we are now. So I think the Yukon is incredibly underexplored. I think we have huge advantages in that we do have an engaged community. We have, a regulatory system and a modern regulatory system and government that's approachable. You can and go talk to them, and communities, as you said. So huge advantages in the Yukon. Yeah, we've had a little bit of headwinds, but I'm really optimistic. I've waited for these gold prices my whole career. So, and I've been in gold all my life. So I think it's actually going to be a great year for the Yukon and for all the companies of YMA. So look forward to taking people on a tour this summer.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'd like to thank all three of you for participating in this panel. It's been a really, really fun conversation. And at this point, I'm going to break here, but we're going to be around. There's other companies here. Please go visit their booths. And I think the bar is open as well. So enjoy a drink as well. Thank you all.